Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, especially to all our friends in Mumbai. Thank you for tuning in to Eyes on India, a program developed and brought to you by Asia Society Philippines, the Asia Society Indian Center, the Indian Cultural Association of the Philippines, and the Embassy of India in Manila. I am Joy Alampay, Executive Director of Asia Society Philippines, and we're sure that all of you are hungry after our yoga session. So today we're serving up dessert for Eyes on India. Today we're spicing it up with chefs Angelo and Zach, and they'll be sharing with us their inspiring journeys to discovering dishes beyond curry and adobo. Aptly, let me quote Miss Deborah Cater by saying, "You have to taste a culture to understand it." And that is what we will be gorging on as we join the conversation today. To tell you more and to introduce our two special guests, I turn you over to Miss Inakshi Sodhi, the Chief Executive Officer of our India Center. Welcome, Inakshi.
Thank you, Joy, for that introduction. Good afternoon to those joining us from India, and good evening to our friends in the Philippines. Welcome. To echo Joy, it's an absolute pleasure to bring you this exciting culinary conversation across borders today. The Asia Society is a leading educational organization dedicated to building awareness about art, business, and policy from across Asia on a global stage. Even as the pandemic posed challenges, the Asia Society leveraged the shift to virtual modes of communication to curate programs that were globally relevant. The digital landscape allowed us to move beyond geographical borders and collaborate with people and institutions across the world, including partnerships between Asia Society's 14 global centers. The program today is a great example of this collaboration. Asia Society Philippines Eyes on Asia series is a wonderful initiative, and we're so delighted that they've inaugurated it with an India edition. India has always shared a close relationship with the Philippines, and we hope that such programs foster further cross-cultural conversations in the future as well. Our Spice It Up conversation today features two incredible and versatile chefs, Chef Thomas Zacharias from India and Chef Angelo Comsti from the Philippines. Chef Thomas Zacharias' culinary journey started at a very young age, inspired by his grandmother's home-cooked food in Kerala. He graduated top of his class at the Wellcome Group Graduate School of Hotel Administration in India and went on to receive high honors at the prestigious Culinary Institute of America. He went on to work under Chef Eric Ripert at the celebrated three-star Michelin restaurant Le Bernardin in New York City and helmed the Olive Bar and Kitchen in Mumbai under Chef Manu Chandra before he became the executive chef at the extremely popular Bombay Canteen, whose cuisine, in their own words, is best described as India-inspired with a touch of Bombay love. A passionate advocate of the Indian food movement, Thomas continues to travel the corners of India through his hashtag Chef on the Road series, where he showcases Indian cuisine celebrating indigenous, local, and seasonal ingredients. On a sabbatical since Jan, we are sure he has some exciting plans in the making. Researcher, writer, event organizer, entrepreneur, Chef Angelo Comsti is a man of many facets. Graduating from Le Cordon Bleu in Australia, he launched his own restaurant. A food ambassador, he combines his love for writing and food, author of also Filipino 75 regional dishes I never had growing up, and 4 other best-selling cookbooks. He's the host of Asia Society Philippines and Asian Culinary Exchange's first web series, In a Nutshell. A bit of housekeeping before we proceed, requesting all attendees to post questions on YouTube and Facebook through the session so our speakers can respond to them. And once again, a very big thank you to Asia Society Philippines, the Embassy of India in Manila, and the Indian Cultural Association of the Philippines for coordinating this effort. Thomas and Angelo, thank you for participating in our Spicing It Up program today. Over to you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Chef Angelo. It's great to see you
Hello,
again.
good afternoon. Yeah. I'm
And
excited to talk about our own cuisine.
yeah, and for those of you watching, Chef Angelo and I got introduced to each other just a couple of weeks ago, but it's amazing to see just in a few conversations that we've had the parallels that lie in Filipino and Indian food in so many different ways, and that'll come through in our conversation today. Chef Angelo, do you want to start off with telling us about your journey and what you're doing with the food of Philippines?
Okay, let's do this. So I'm gonna talk about preserving regional Filipino cuisine. Let's put up the slides.
To those of you watching, I'm tuning in from Mumbai, and
What time is it
uh,
there?
it's in the afternoon, about 3:30 in the afternoon. But I believe we have people tuning in from across the world, and I think this conversation will be a lot more engaging if we can get some questions in and we can answer those. There you go. You're presenting now. Okay.
Okay, so spicing it up, preserving regional Filipino cuisine. Next slide, please. So we start with the age-old question, what is Filipino cuisine? My definition has evolved over the years. Next. Next slide, please. As a kid, my idea of Filipino food was what was served at home. My dad's adobo with chicken liver and tausi, my grandmother's caldereta, my Lola Belen's boquillos, and my mom's leche flan. That changed and expanded when eating out became a habit. Not long, aristocrat restaurants chicken barbecue, Cafe Juanico's twice cooked adobo, and Amber's pancit and pichi pichi became a part of my culinary vocabulary. Next. But it was when I chanced upon the works of food writers like Doreen Fernandez and travel became a personal luxury that made me realize that I really don't know anything much about our own cuisine. There's so much I didn't know, and honestly, I felt guilty and somewhat embarrassed because I've been writing about food and telling people how much I love Filipino cuisine when apparently I only knew perhaps like a quarter of it. Next. Imagine I learned about the Japanese mochi before our very own masi from Cebu, and they're practically the same thing. And so, like any proper journalist would do, I did my research and traveled around the country to discover about regional cuisine because I believe that they are as much Filipino as our everyday adobo and sinigang found in the metro. Next. And that's how my fifth cookbook, also Filipino, 75 regional dishes I never had growing up, came about. I went to a total of 22 provinces and searched high and low for food the locals commonly ate at home. Next. So basically, what I did was I asked friends from different provinces to show me around the area, introduce me to the people who are willing to share their home cooked recipes. There were times when I went to a street side shack, checked out their food, and asked how they cooked a particular dish. Sometimes I got turned down, but then there were moments also when they were very generous to share their recipes and secrets with me. Ask me what Filipino food is now, and I can explain it with much pride because I have very fond memories to go in my definition. It's just so varied and influenced and diverse. For example, next slide. Like in Albay, before going there, I only knew one way to cook taro leaves, and that's laing. But have you heard of pinangat and palusag and sinuan? The palusag, according to Chef Ato, is the farmer's solution to obesity because they would just throw all the ingredients garlic, onion, ginger, pork belly, salted fish, and coconut milk in a large pan, start a fire using the branches of a tree, and let it cook until the flames die. By the time their field work is done, the dish will be ready and waiting for them. The sinuan is the go-to dish for anyone who's nursing a hangover. In Bicolano, suwa refers to calamansi. It becomes a verb in the case of this soup because the juice from the sour fruit is added at the end. I've never come across a dish that doesn't cook taro leaves and coconut milk, and so this is a great discovery. I believe that a dish becomes even more flavorful when you know the story behind it. Next. For example, in Camarines Sur, they have a noodle dish which is ramen-like called kinalas. It's a soup that started in the Yangdang Street in Naga, where the hot food would be waiting for the tricycle drivers who had just finished their early morning shifts. A cow's head is boiled for hours to infuse flavor in the broth. The point at which the meat starts to separate from the bone is referred to as the kinalas, which literally means to fall off. Next. And then there's the bule beluga in Pampanga. 76-year-old Lilian Burameo taught me this recipe. During her recent trip to Porac, she met members of the beluga tribe who introduced her to this, their version of pork and beans. Next. In Cavite, there's a noodle soup called kalandrakas, which was cooked and served in wakes back in the day. The grieving guests would bring a buloy or donations in the form of ingredients, and they drop them in the pot with broth and macaroni noodles. Everybody gets to enjoy it after. Now, it has become a staple among Caviteños on New Year's Eve for prosperity. Next. When it comes to vegetable soups, Batangas has bulanglang, Ilocos has dinengdeng, and Iloilo has laswa. The first two are flavored with fried fish, while the last variant is seasoned simply with salt or fish sauce. Next. Our regions have different interpretations of dinuguan, which is a dish made with pig's blood. Bulacan has tinumis, and instead of using vinegar, they use tamarind broth. It is loose and not thick. In Isabela, I got to eat in a carinderia, which is famous for the rice porridge and sirkele. Sirkele is dinuguan, but they use beef innards rather than pork. In Ilocos, they have dinardaraan, which is an oily and drier version of this pig's blood dish. Next. And then we have dishes named after the sound they make when they are cooked. In Pampanga, they have pulutok, which is made of pig's lungs, and tibok-tibok, a pudding made of carabau's milk. They are named so because of the sound they make when they are being cooked. In the process of producing this book, I also learned cooking techniques and tricks, as well as ingredients indigenous to the country. Next slide. In Ilocos Norte, they have a noodle soup called Miki Malabed. It has a flashy red color because of the anato oil. And the way they do it is they dump the seeds in a metal strainer and drop the whole thing in oil so it gets the color. Next. In Isabela, Nati Rica Fuente makes and sells a lesser-known rice cake called binalay. And she said that the secret is not just to use any glutinous rice flour, but it has to be a certain variety of short grain rice. Next. The Philippines has more than 60 indigenous items listed in the Ark of Taste, a catalog of products around the world which are in danger of extinction, non-propagation, or simple death. Among them is the batuan, a hard green fruit with a tomato-like shape that is found mainly on the island of Negros. The unripe fruit is cooked as a souring agent with fish, pork, and in soups such as sinigang and tinola soup. Ominio rice, which is a medium glutinous grain variety found all throughout Mountain Province. It is slow growing, requiring at least a 5-month growth period from transplanting to harvest. And it is used for rice desserts and for making rice wine. And then there's a tinigib white corn, which is a common substitute for rice, especially in the Visayan region. It is a healthier staple because it has a lower glycemic index. It is an ingredient in cooking, mostly for desserts like pudding. It can also be roasted to produce a corn drink they call kaping mais. Sadly, it runs the risk of being extinct as more farmers are switching to genetically modified yellow corn crops for higher financial returns. Now, the reason why I wanted to do the book is not just to acknowledge and increase our awareness about our own food, but to preserve the dishes, techniques, and produce. Next slide. In Ilocos Norte, there are less than a handful old people left selling inartem. The rickety stalls are located behind the city hall across the public high school. Inartem is different kinds of fruits that have been sliced and allowed to soak in vinegar. Before, you would see them all over town. Now, only 2 people sell them. Next slide. In Malabon, I met Tessie Ponzolano, who's the only one left making this street side snack called Triangulo Valencia. It's a triangle-shaped banana spring roll, and it has glutinous rice in the middle. She first tried it in the wet market, then she asked the guy selling it to teach her the recipe. He willingly did, and after a few weeks, he died. That would have been the last time people learned about this snack. It's a good thing that there's Tessie who is continuing his legacy. Now, many people love to eat, Filipinos most especially, like me. I travel to eat because it's one way to really immerse myself and get to know the culture and lifestyle of that area. And since our cuisine is varied and different, it gives us much leverage to have the people traveling. Next slide. So going back to the question, what is Filipino cuisine? Well, all our answers will vary depending on how much we know. But to be able to get an authentic definition, the answer is out there across 81 provinces, 17 regions, and an archipelago made of over 7,000 islands. Next slide. Through my travels, I realized that the more I eat, the less I know. So it's a good thing then that I'm always hungry. Thank you.
That got me salivating a lot. And
Too much
and
information. Too much information.
I'm adding Philippines in my list of places to go explore as soon as we can all travel safely.
We can't wait to have you here and try our food.
But that was really fascinating. I mean, I obviously hadn't heard of a lot of these dishes, and I'm sure the people from Philippines who are watching learned something as well. What is really interesting is that there were so many parallels to what you just said, and even in the dishes within Indian food. And I'm going to take you very quickly through my journey.
Okay, I'm excited.
So again, I mean, I like how we didn't share notes, but we both started with this with a similar question. What you see on your screens right now is typically what most people around the world and also in India would attribute to as defining Indian food. So on the top left, you see butter chicken. Then you see dosa, idli, sambar. You see dal makhni, and you see on the extreme right gulab jamun. And I'm sure this is familiar to a lot of people tuning in from across the world right now. But when you really think about it, India is an extremely diverse country. We have 28 states and 8 union territories spread across a huge geographical area. And within each of these regions, there are deeper communities which have nuances in their cuisine as well. And it cannot be that the same 35 to 40 dishes that you've been eating at Indian restaurants define Indian food. So for me, my journey, like Inakshi said, began at home in Kerala. I grew up there, and I went on to become a chef. I studied at the Culinary Institute of America in New York, came back to India, joined a European restaurant. And typically, in the way chefs are trained, both in India and abroad, you're typically taught a Western style of cooking. Your kitchens are designed like French brigades. And especially when I was learning to become a chef, Indian food is hardly given any importance. It actually took a very extensive food trip across Europe for me to kind of realize how little time and energy I'd spent in exploring my own cuisine. And that got me thinking, and that was around the same time that my business partners at the Bombay Canteen, Chef Floyd Cardoz, Samir Seth, and Yash Banage were looking for a head chef for a restaurant that was meant to celebrate the diversity of Indian food. This is a restaurant that opened about 6 years ago now. But it truly looked at Indian food in a very different light. and to be able to do justice to our vision and our philosophy, I knew that as a chef I needed to learn, because like I said earlier, my knowledge of Indian food is extremely limited. So what I did was I decided to travel again, and this time I traveled across India. I traveled across 18 different places in India, try to learn from the experts. And in the case of Indian food, the experts are typically home cooks, and people who run small street side restaurants, much like Chef Angelo did. And what I saw on this trip was really blew my mind. I saw ingredients and techniques and recipes and traditions which uh, I didn't know about previously, and were definitely not making their way onto mainstream restaurants or even conversations around Indian food. And that's when I realized that I wanted to kind of at least attempt to tell that story and get people excited about Indian food, starting with people in India. Um, started traveling extensively since then, and my travels took me to different extremes of the country. I started documenting it. I started sharing these stories through different media formats, and that has kind of been my journey over the last 6 years. To give you some insight into what real Indian food looks like, for example, this is from my home state of Kerala. On the extreme left is a saring fruit called bimli, which again, when you think about Indian food, you know of say things like tamarind, but this is a fruit which is currently in season, which is used in a lot of seafood curries. The second image is actually a picture of a breakfast I had at home in Kerala. This is puttu and kadla. Puttu is uh, what you see here is made with rice flour and coconut that's steamed in cylindrical vessels, served with chickpea curry, and this duck curry. Again, something my grandmom used to cook for us a lot. Uh, this right here is toddy, which is actually a fermented drink from the sap of palm trees that is extremely popular in Kerala. And we actually have toddy shops which celebrate this. And in fact, what you see on the next is these toddy shops also tend to have really interesting food combinations. This is a local fish curry along with tapioca, boiled tapioca, which is another vegetable that we eat a lot of down south. I was very recently in Uttarakhand, which is a state up north, where I spent about 2.5 weeks there exploring different parts of the state. And again, it opened my eyes to so much out there. On the extreme left is Bichu Booty Ka Saag, which is a Himalayan stinging nettle, which again, it grows wild there and people consume it similar to how you would a palak paneer. Except everyone knows palak paneer and nobody knows bichu booty saag. Very much like your tinumis from Bulacan. This is a dish of offals from Uttarakhand called butwa, which is made with goat intestines and goat and different types of organs. This is actually a type of tea which is consumed in the northernmost tips of Uttarakhand called namkeen chai, which is made with apricot seeds and mutton fat. Right here, what you see is again a dish that really blew my mind. Was a dish made with fresh snow. So soon after the first snow in Uttarakhand, they actually collect the snow and kind of season it with souring agents and different fruit syrups, and they have this nice little afternoon snack in the winter sun. In India, predominantly through most of India, you only get limes, but we actually have beautiful lemons in different parts of the country as well. And these are there's a citrus fruit called galangal, which is quite similar to say an Italian lemon, which most people in India don't know anything about. I was in Tamil Nadu a few years ago. Some of you may be familiar with rasam, which is a really thin kind of dal, which is extremely spicy. But I discovered that crab rasam is actually something that's found in Chettinad cuisine. This is a bun paratha, which is a light, fluffy bread that's made on the streets of Madurai, which has a little bit of banana in there, and it's got made with refined flour, and it's kind of flaky on the outside and really soft and tender on the inside. On the right, you see a vegetable called avlakai, which is similar to or in the same family as bitter gourd, but it's a wild vegetable that you get in Tamil Nadu, which I can bet that most Tamilians in today's generation probably won't recognize either. One of my favorite food trips so far has been in Kashmir. Again, the fact that you can find such beautiful morels in Kashmir is something that I knew about, but again, it's very hard to come by in the rest of the country. I think one of the most common Indian dishes in Indian restaurants is the Rogan Josh, which again I feel has been really bastardized in Indian restaurants because of all the versions that I tasted of Rogan Josh in different parts of the country. When I finally got the opportunity to try the real version or the traditional version in Kashmir, it really blew my mind. It is what you see on the top right of this picture. It is not really heavy. It's not greasy. It's not the kind of dish that will give you a heartburn like you would typically find with Rogan Josh, but it's actually light and nuanced and incidentally made of sheep's meat and mustard oil and flavored with fennel and dry ginger. It's actually a really beautiful dish. And this right here is something called a harissa. And I'm going to let you watch this. There's a dish called harissa from Kashmir, which is made with, again, sheep meat, which is cooked with, sheep's meat is cooked with different grains and spices and eaten with bread. There are different sorts of greens which are typically found in Kashmir and which are highly seasonal, like the one you see here. Actually, if you notice, what's in the background is actually a floating market, which is on Dhal Lake in Srinagar. It's a floating vegetable market where farmers gather every morning at dawn to kind of exchange stories and interact with each other. It's a tradition that goes back 150 years. What you see on the right here is actually an indigenous cheese from Kashmir called kalari. And again, I mean, people in different cities in India are familiar with things like Parmesan and cheddar, but very few have really tasted or even know about kalari. And then again, I mean, I can keep going on and on. In Nagaland, the fermented soybeans are turned into, are used to flavor dishes. It's called axon. Obviously, it's a lot more potent than how soybean is used in, say, Japan, but it's actually a very commonly used ingredient in Nagaland. The idea of making sausages is actually common in different parts of India. This is a Goan version of chorizo, which is almost it's prepared like you would see in a rosary. Extremely flavorful. Obviously, it's got a nice the red color comes from red chili, but it's a fascinating sausage, which is one of my favorite things to eat. In West Bengal, what you see here is a chutney that's made with fresh tamarind, which comes into season in the winter, along with sweet potato and radish. Here in Rajasthan, you can see something called ghevar, which is made with a batter of refined flour, which is kind of poured into boiling oil to make in this mold to make this particular sweet. This is a vegetable called moras bhaji, which is from Maharashtra. It grows in the wild in the marshes in Mumbai. It is succulent in nature, and it tastes it has a salty taste to it, available throughout the year, yet you'll never find this on a restaurant menu in Mumbai. In Odisha, there's something called a pakalabat, which is fermented rice water, which is eaten with different components, different accompaniments around it. Again, eaten in the summer to act as a cooling agent. This right here is something called mahua, which is the flower of a wild tree that grows in not just in Madhya Pradesh but in different parts of the country, and is consumed by the tribals and even turned into a spirit. But you will not find this in cities. So then my question to you is, what is Indian food? The pictures you see here are kind of interpretations of regional Indian dishes and using indigenous ingredients that we kind of showcase and celebrated at the Bombay Canteen. But the whole point of this presentation was to just open your eyes to the fact that Indian food is a lot more than what you saw on that first slide and the kind of food that you've been exposed to most of your life. And that was it. And like I said, there are a lot of parallels that we have between our cuisines. I think the one thing that I notice in common is there's a sense of imminent loss. It feels like a lot of our traditions are going to get lost with this generation. I think much like in India and Philippines as well, a lot of these traditions get passed on orally or through generations. And if our current generation is not excited about it or takes the care and attention to kind of learn and absorb that wisdom, a lot of these traditions could get lost forever.
But when you present regional food to the locals, to the people in the capital, how do they welcome it? Do you present it very traditionally, or you put your own twist to it?
So we realized very early on that if we had presented it very traditionally, today's generation of diners wouldn't get excited about it. So it was almost inevitable that we had to put some sort of a twist to catch people's attention. But in a way, finding that balance of tradition versus modernity and kind of figuring out how to retain the integrity of the dishes inspired from, but still make it fun and exciting and appealing to people.
You know what? To be honest, my knowledge of Indian cuisine is very limited to pakora and butter chicken.
Yeah.
Whatever you presented now, I had no idea about those dishes.
Same with me, right? I mean, my exposure of Filipino food extends to adobo, and which is why I need to make a trip there. And you're going to take me all around Philippines, and obviously I'll do the same when you come down to India. But I think should we take some questions?
Yeah. We have a question here from Srishti Kurana. What are the cultural similarities between India and the Philippines? Well, based on your presentation, I realized that you use a lot of offals too, and that you use a lot of herbs and fruits to flavor your dishes, which is what we do also in the Philippines. And I think based on what I've eaten on Indian cuisine, both cuisines are very powerful and potent in flavor, no?
Yeah, and these are both cuisines which have a long history. These are very ancient cuisines which have evolved over the years. So, and I think one thing that we don't recognize when we talk about cuisine is how the topography of a place impacts the food and what grows there. And I think because India and especially like some parts of India, especially the South and the Philippines, have a similar kind of topography and climate, you'd find that a lot of foods tend to be similar. There'll be a lot of similarities, and obviously our history of influences, right? The fact that we've had Western powers invade and kind of rule our nations, spice trade, all of those inevitably impact the cuisine and make the cuisine evolve. So cultural similarities, there are going to be a lot. And I think, like you rightly said, the fact that we have most of our food have potent flavors, and I think that's a great way to put it, because most people think of especially Indian food as being really spicy, but that's not true. That's not really true. I mean, not all Indian food is spicy. In fact, most of Indian food is not spicy. But what most Indian food is that it's very, very flavorful. And that's similar in Philippines as well, I guess.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with geography also. I mean, based on my presentation, there are a lot of iterations between
Ex-
different provinces. And like in the Philippines, since we are an archipelago made up of three major islands, I realized that the major island down south, which is Mindanao, has dishes that are a lot more similar to our neighboring countries, Malaysia and Indonesia.
Exactly. I mean, and again, like just like that. I mean, the food of Punjab, which is on the northwestern part of India, has so much more in common with the food of the cuisine of Pakistan as opposed to the food of Kerala, for example. And yet, but somehow our perception of cuisine is so defined by geographical borders, which or political borders rather, which is not really accurate.
Hmm.
Um, I see a question from Joy Chawla who said, "My daughter is currently taking up HRM. It is sad that this industry has been very much hurt by the pandemic. What can you say to encourage and lift up the spirits of our HRM students with respect to the future of hospitality and the food industry?"
Well, first of all, hi Joy. Hi to your daughter. I hope you guys are doing well and are safe. Like right now in the Philippines, they had to do a lockdown again for 2 weeks. So a lot of the restaurants can't do dine in. They can only do takeout, all fresco dining. So that's another blow to the restaurant industry. I mean, for a whole year, they've been striving to earn a lot to pay for the ingredients, for the inventory, for the people, and now we have to do a lockdown again. It's really hard, but what we can do is only hope. I think there's progress. We have vaccines coming, so we can only hope and yeah, pray for the future.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are going to get through this.
Mhm.
Obviously, with through a lot of suffering as well, but eventually, when we come out the other side, I think at least let's hope that we all come with a certain understanding, appreciation of what we have, and celebrate that.
Now, chef,
Um,
was it hard for you to learn about regional cuisine, or were the people very generous in sharing their recipes?
Actually, Angelo, I've seen the transition happen in the last 8 years that I've been traveling through India. So, say 8 years ago, people are a little more close to the idea of it, and not just because it's not like they treated their recipes as secretive. They just weren't. It's almost, I got the sense that a lot of people were ashamed of their food, especially in certain parts of India, and they just didn't understand my excitement and curiosity of learning more about the cuisine, as opposed to and fast forward to 2 months ago when I was traveling through Uttarakhand, and everyone's excited that by the fact that I want to come to Uttarakhand and tell that story and get more people excited about the food from there, and there was a lot more kind of initiative from their side to give me a real sense of traditional food and culture. So I think there has been a transition. I think people in India are slowly waking up to the fact that we have some incredible food in the country, which we haven't really done justice to.
And that's another similar thing between our cuisines and our countries. Just in the past few years, the Filipinos have like a wave of nationalism and appreciation for our regional food. So it's exciting times for all of us.
Absolutely. Um, I think,
Chef, there's a
are there any
question
other
for you.
questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
could you tell us a little bit about your series? What are some surprising things that you have discovered in your travels?
So, for those of you who don't know, the hashtag COTR stands for Chef on the Road, which basically is my food travels across the country. And I think the more I travel, the more I realize how little I know about Indian food. I have now been to about 25 states and union territories across India. And with time, my trips get more intensive. I get deeper into those cuisines, but I've hardly grazed the surface, and I think surprising would be a good way to put how I feel every time I travel, because I'll always come across ingredients and techniques and recipes and traditions which I hadn't known before. I think what's exciting for me as a chef is that I can continue this exploration and continue telling the story endlessly, because it's such a vast and diverse country. Um, I think Pamela wants to know where she can get your book and what the title is again. So if you can share.
Okay. Well, the book is called also Filipino 75 Regional Dishes I Never Had Growing Up. And it's available in Amazon. In the Philippines, it's available in Lazada, Shopee, and even in the website of my publisher.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting my own copy. It's which and hopefully I can find some ingredients locally which I can cook some of your recipes with.
Chef, have you preserved? Have you documented all the recipes that you discovered in your travels? Are you coming up with a cookbook also? I hope so.
I want to come up with a cookbook. I haven't done so yet, and maybe you're the kind of nudge that I needed and the inspiration that I needed, because your book looks fabulous.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, I've been documenting it personally, but it's I mean, it's only until recently that I'm actually getting the entire recipes listed. So, like I said earlier on, when I traveled, people wouldn't really be open to sharing those recipes, but that's slowly changing now. And there are a lot of people in India who are starting to, showcase and celebrate regional Indian food. So there's an actual movement that's happening in a positive direction here.
Hmm.
Pamela has another question. What's the easiest and hardest meal to prepare that you've encountered, Chef Angelo?
Easiest and hardest meal. Wow. I've encountered. You know what? A lot of the dishes I discovered involved slow cooking. So they may not be the hardest to prepare, but they take a lot of time to prepare. But I don't mind because the more time you put in it, the more flavorful it will be.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, and this is something that most people don't realize, and a lot of people are intimidated about cooking Indian food, even in India, because especially new cooks, young cooks, because if they feel like it's extremely complicated, but a lot of Indian food is really, really simple. Yes, you have to know how to balance the flavors, you have to know how to use spices, and you need to know those basic cooking techniques, but it is not supremely more difficult than say another cuisine like say Italian or Mexican. So I think people just need to be open to the idea of and I've been sharing a lot of these recipes through my social media over the last year, and getting people, more and more people, to cook these recipes and understand and realize that Indian food is really simple.
Well, in Filipino cuisine also, we have that famous dish called adobo, which is very easy. You just need to throw in like 5 to 7 ingredients in a pot, cook it, and then that's it.
I would imagine that all the adobo versions that I've had in the past, and most of them probably I've had in the US, taste very different from what you find in Philippines. Do you actually? I have a question. Do you have different renditions of adobo?
We have a
Or is
lot
it?
of renditions of adobo. So we have one that uses soy sauce, vinegar, garlic, black peppercorn, and bay leaf. We have one that's called adobo sa pula, which is the red adobo because it has annatto seeds. We have another one that's called adobo sa puti, which is white adobo. It doesn't have any soy sauce. It's cooked just in vinegar.
So I believe Priya has a question about what spices are used commonly between both countries. I'm guessing you use chili as well. Is chili
We use a
common in?
lot of chilies, yeah. And because of China, the influence of China, we use star anise.
Yeah. So star anise is used in some parts of India, but not as common as other spices. We use a lot of ingredients like turmeric, cumin, coriander seed, black
Ginger,
pepper,
yeah.
ginger, of course. Yeah, but again, the way I was taught Indian food growing up was that every dish had cumin, turmeric, coriander powder, and chili, but that's really not how it goes. In fact, like in cuisines in the northeastern part of India, so places like Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland, spices, I mean, they hardly use any spices at all, which you would never associate with Indian food. But what about souring agents? Do you use the ingredients like, I'm guessing you use ingredients like tamarind?
Yeah, we use a lot of tamarind in our dishes. And we use a lot. The thing about Filipino cuisine is we love the taste, the flavor of sour. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of souring ingredients, leaves, fruits, like the one I showed earlier. But one, we use that to sour our dishes. We use tamarind for our sinigang. So yeah,
And vinegar, you have different forms of vinegar as well?
we have different forms of vinegar.
Yeah, so I mean, I think using vinegar is again a concept which doesn't exist in every part of the country, but in places like Goa and Kerala, there are vinegars used. I think I'm guessing that's the influence from the Portuguese and other Western countries. There's a
Yep, we have a
question from
question here. From who?
Ketaki Varma. In this age of gastro and other renditions focusing more on contemporary styles of preparation, how does one retain the originality of cuisines? So, I mean, for me, like I said, my approach is, I mean, ideally, I wouldn't want to. I mean, if I'm trying to get people to understand regional cuisines, I would try and showcase them in their original form, in their traditional form. But we don't live in an ideal world, and people going out to eat don't are somehow we're in this age where the traditional is boring and people are looking for modern experiences, people are looking for fun and excitement. And so for me, it was important to find that balance. The way I approach kind of creating a dish has always been once I've kind of identified a dish that I want to bring onto the menu, I try and recreate the original first. So I learn how to prepare the traditional version of the dish as close to it as possible. And it's only until I get that right that then I think of ways to kind of modify it if needed. And I try and exercise a lot of restraint. So I try and do as little as possible to mess with the dish.
Well, one way to retain the originality of cuisines is to do a cookbook to preserve all these traditional dishes. And for the people to buy the cookbook, do the recipes at home and try it themselves, right? Because it's a different language when you do it in a restaurant setting because you have to attract a certain market.
Yeah,
but for
absolutely.
A lot of these dishes came from home. So one way to retain them is to cook them at home too.
So there's another question that says, do you have a dish in your region that you should think, do you think everyone should know about? And tell us about it. I think I can say from both of us, it's not adobo or butter chicken.
It's not adobo. But they say that in the Philippines, because we've been influenced by a lot of colonizers, right? We have China, America, Spain. But one cuisine that was born before pre-colonization is our kinilaw, which is basically raw fish cured in vinegar.
Wow, it's almost like a ceviche.
It's like ceviche, but ceviche they use tangy fruits, right? They use lemon, they use lime. We don't use fruit, we just use vinegar.
That's amazing. For me, I think within my region is Kerala, or that's where I come from, and that's where I grew up, and I discovered that there's a Jewish diaspora in Kerala, which goes back 2,000 years, and they're a very, very small community. There's very few of them left. So I recently shared a recipe for a chicken curry called elakal on my Instagram feed, which was my way of getting people to take notice of this small diasporic cuisine, because it's very much at the verge of kind of getting lost.
Chef, I have a question for you. I was just wondering, do people in India still make their spices from scratch, or is there a sachet that people can buy and use at home?
No, that's actually one of the biggest misconceptions about Indian food in the West, and the whole idea of Madras curry powder, which is so common. It's actually a British invention. The one thing you should know about the way we use spices is that there is no one formula to it. You find names of spices, spice combinations or masalas like garam masala, which literally translates to hot masala. But even the recipe for that keeps changing depending on which part of the country you go or which home you're in. So there's no one formula to it. I think within every cuisine there are different spice combinations within each dish, and so you can't really kind of standardize spice combinations into a sachet. You'll need to have hundreds and thousands of those different sachets for different dishes across the country. In Inakshi's as a question, she says, "Do tell us about some of the favorites that you added to your menus." Chef Angelo, why don't you tell us about some of your favorite dishes on from your book?
Well, I mentioned it in my presentation earlier. It's called kinalas. It's like ramen when I first learned about it, and it was actually started by tricycle drivers in that region.
Wow.
So before they start their morning shift, they throw a head of the cow in a big pot, let it boil, and after their shift, they start eating it.
Wow.
Very
That's
interesting,
amazing.
very flavorful. They add noodles, they add pork skin rind, they add eggs. It's really, really good.
One of my favorite dishes that I've added onto the menu is actually a dish called butte ka kees, which is basically a dish from Indore. The traditional dish is basically corn that's grated and cooked with milk and green chili and ginger and cumin, and it's almost like a porridge. I turned that dish into making, I making almost like polenta sticks, like crispy sticks with the same ingredients, which is crunchy on the outside and soft and creamy on the inside, which then I served with like a coconut and red chili chutney and the same Morris bhaji leaf that you saw earlier. I think we can take a last question from Caitlin. What's next in your journey as regional indigenous cuisine champions?
You first.
I'm trying to figure that piece out. I've recently left my job as a chef at the Bombay Canteen, and the one thing I know is that I will continue on this journey of preserving and celebrating regional indigenous cuisine. I'm looking at ways where I can gather more people towards this cause and in this movement. So bringing together a sense of community and figuring out ways that I can actually push the needle and impact greater change is what my focus will be.
So same for me. I still continue to preach the word, tell more people about regional cuisine, expose them to different dishes. Hopefully, I can find more avenues like a restaurant where I can have the people actually taste the food from the regions.
You should definitely open a restaurant.
We should do it, and then we should do a collab.
Yes. And I think the Asiatic Society will be Asia Society will be excited to kind of enable that.
In line with that, I'd like to thank also the Asia Society for having this avenue for us to tell more people about our own regional cuisines.
Yeah, thank you. And these conversations are important, and I'm glad that everyone who tuned in today kind of was receptive to what we had to say. Chef, congratulations on your book, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. And hopefully, we'll meet in person, and we can share these conversations over some regional dishes next time.
I can't wait. I mean, just looking at the photos earlier, my mouth was watering. So I can't wait to try your food.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
We have another question that came in. How is the coffee of the Philippines compared to the chai in India?
Oh, that's a tough one because I've not had the coffee in the Philippines, but I'm actually having the chai in India. The chai in India is made with, obviously there are variations to it, but it's typically with buffalo milk. There's usually ginger, and the way I like it is with things like spices like cardamom in there, and of course tea leaves, with really strong tea leaves, which is brewed and boiled for a certain period of time.
Well, the thing is, I don't drink coffee. I never liked the taste of coffee, but what I do know is that we carry all four kinds of coffee: the Robusta, the Arabica. We have the Barako, which is one of the most in demand, I think. So yeah, that's the only thing I know about coffee. Sorry.
Great. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we close, can we bring in Miss Vishwanjali from the Embassy of India in Manila for our final remark?
Yes. Thank you, Chef Comsti and Chef Zach, for this wonderful conversation today. And I must say that your passion for what you do is indeed infectious. And it was a very important conversation between two cultures where I believe there are a large number of people to whom if you ask that what are some of your happiest days, I think what we think about what are some of my best food memories, right? So indeed a wonderful conversation between two cultures which have a rich culinary wealth, and listening to two champions of regional cuisine, I think what comes to my mind is a set of lines that I happened to read a few days back on this wonderful blog called The Brain Pickings. It was written by Michael Pollan, and what he writes is in ancient Greece, the word for cook was megeros, which comes from the word which like the word today for that is the word that we know about is the word magic. And he says that I would watch rapt when my mother conjured her most magical dishes, like the tightly wrapped packages of fried chicken keef that, when cut open with a sharp knife, liberated a pool of butter and an aromatic gust of herbs. He further adds that even the most ordinary dish follows a satisfying arc of transformation, magically becoming more than the sum of its ordinary ingredients. And in almost every dish, you can find, besides the culinary ingredients, of course, the ingredients of a story. There is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. And I think by being the champions of regional cuisine, you're not only taking our traditional food to people, but you're also taking the stories of families, the stories of communities, the stories of regions to the people, and in some way telling how food has, in a way, kind of civilized us. So thank you once again for this important conversation. I wish both of you, on behalf of the Embassy of India here in Manila, lots of luck and lots of best wishes from us. More power to you. I would also take this opportunity to thank Asia Society Philippines and Asia Society India Center for coming up with such a well thought program, Eyes on India. And I assure you my full support in our future endeavors as well. Let me also take this opportunity to lastly thank our audience for tuning in. Have a good evening and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.